All righty. Okay. Well, hey there, Melanie. It's good to have you here. And yeah, I'll do a little bit of an intro before we dive in. But for anybody who's watching this, this is our first episode of Abundant Leadership Live. And this is a show that we're going to be doing consistently that is abundant, talking about leadership and interviewing different leaders that we've worked with or that we know in the marketplace who we think are helping to pioneer in creating cultures that really are abundant in the marketplace. And so this series is meant to be a way for us to give people a window into the types of conversations that we have at Abundant, but also to add value to anybody who's in leadership and helping them see what other leaders are up to in the marketplace and learn about the different sides of leadership. And there's the side of how you lead individuals and lead teams, lead prospects, right? Lead your customers in the marketplace. And there's that external leadership, but all of that's a reflection of the leadership that's happening internally also, and leading yourself, right? And making the changes, doing the work you have to do with you to be able to show up to all those other relationships. So we hope that this show is valuable to anybody who's watching. We'll be doing it a number of times. We'll be doing it twice a week. And today's our first episode. And I'm really excited to have Melanie Fellay here with me, a good friend, a client, and a leader, a badass female leader and CEO of Spekit, who has been so fun to watch on her journey. And I think that you've got a lot to share and people should be hearing from you, Melanie. So it's great to have you here today.
Thanks. Yeah, really excited to be here, have this conversation, and see where it goes.
See where it goes, yeah. So before we get into the meat of the conversation, I'd love to just give you an opportunity to share a bit about yourself, Spekit, and just what you guys are up to and how how's business right now, and just so people have a sense of who you are, what you're up to, and then we can get into the conversation from there. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, everyone. I'm Melanie. I am the co-founder and CEO of Spekit. And I, just a little bit of background, went to school in Colorado and then started my career in San Francisco. I've primarily worked in technology companies and in a variety of roles, but my most recent role before starting Spekit was leading business operations. So working cross-functionally around, I owned our tech stack. So think Salesforce, those kinds of tools that, as a sales professional, I use every day. I led our enablement teams as well as a lot of our go-to-market strategy. And so it was through that time and experience that I really got inspiration for Spekit. So started the company 3 years ago and was really looking for a better way to enable our teams, enable our reps to have, to say the right things when they're in conversations, to know how to use their tools, know how to, walk through processes. And it's really meant to surface, think of us almost as a digital companion for your employee, where wherever you are in your workflow, you're a click away from whatever answer or resource or enablement that you might need.
Awesome. So how long have you been on this journey of founding and now leading Spekit?
Yeah, good question. So officially the company, we incorporated in February 2018, but my co-founder and I started working on the idea about 6 months prior to that. So right around September 2017. And then just, Spekit was born out of actually my research looking for a tool for us to purchase. So in my former role, I'd spent over a year kind of evaluating different learning solutions, knowledge bases, enablement platforms. And so I'd spent a lot of time thinking about the problem leading up to it, looked at a lot of different options in the marketplace, and then, really started designing like, well, what am I really looking to accomplish here? What am I looking to solve for? And kind of combining the different features I liked into the company. So officially 2.5 going on 3, but actually closer to 4 from a kind of problem solution standpoint.
Awesome. So there's 2 parts to leadership, right? There's the idea, there's the inspiration, there's this opportunity to fill this need in the marketplace. Let's create something. And then there's becoming the leader that leads the organization, right? and you've got to have both. And I think a good place for us to start today is really talking about your journey and sharing about the different steps along the way, and the different ways that you've had to grow as a leader, as a woman, as a human, as all these things to continue to move Spekit forward. And also, I think we can talk a little bit today too around what have you learned through the pandemic, because I think that there's a lot of things changing it's kind of like, yeah, no shit. There's a lot of things changing right now. Everything's changing. But I think there's you guys just had your best quarter ever, and I'd love to talk a little bit about some of the things you've learned too. But to begin here, where would you like to start? And just talking about, there's the company, there's what you do, how you meet the marketplace, and then there's what you've had to learn along the way, and how you've had to grow to really fill the shoes of leading this organization. Any place you'd like to start in talking about that?
Yeah, I guess I can talk a little bit about just like, what it meant for me to take the leap, and really what I had to learn on a personal level, right? Because when it comes to really any leadership role or any, career, generally speaking, like there's going to be, like you said, those kind of marketplace, technical, or, management level skill sets that you need to develop. And then what I, very quickly learned is that really your personal growth at any point in time needs to exceed your professional growth, your company growth, to really be able to meet the, accelerated needs coming forward. And so for me, my journey from like more of a personal growth standpoint, like, I'd seen the term out there, and I learned a little bit about that, but I hadn't really made that a priority in my life, if I'm being perfectly honest. I would, try and eat healthy. I'd work out a little bit. Like I'd listen to, a meditation every so often, but it was actually meeting Zachary Wagner completely serendipitously at a conference when I was about 6 months in with Spekit. I'd been like trying so hard, and it was just, it's a lot of work. And to be honest, I don't think we would have made it this far had I not put in that level of work. But it was just really the psychological demands and the mindset, that I needed to be able to keep to be on that journey. And so just a little bit of an anecdote, because it's one of my favorite stories, and really how we now know each other, was I was at this sales conference, and I was standing at a table with these 8 other male CEOs, male leaders, and Zachary was there.
Hard, right?
Yep, it was exactly. Yep. It was Gerhard. Zachary. It was the Sales 3.0 conference, and it was a phenomenal conference. I'd gone there both for like prospecting, but also because I was new to sales, so I wanted to learn, the best practices around sales. And I was dressed all in black because my career previously was in real estate finance, right? So I was, 10, 15 percentile from a, woman to male ratio in the company. I'd been part of the like boys club and dressed all in black. And so I, was really, I guess the presence and the way that I was showing up was very from a masculine place, right? I was very much so leading with confidence and assertiveness and, very almost, the traditional masculine traits. And Zachary pulls me to the side, and he kind of starts the conversation by asking me, what felt like a very odd question at the time. He was like, hey, I've been watching you for a little while, love what you have to say, but, just observing your nature, like I see that you have this very strong feminine side, but you seem to be leading with your masculine energy, right? Those masculine traits. And have you ever thought of really embracing that more feminine energy that you have? And at the time, like I had never even thought of like those two things being separate. I just kind of thought like, okay, this is how I show up. And so he, that conversation turned into a 2-hour conversation around just leadership and what it really meant for me to step into more of that feminine leadership and, leading with empathy and with trust and with compassion and really owning more of who I am versus trying to, play in what everyone else's role to define as a leader. And so that really started my whole journey, one with abundant, but really peeling back and really uncovering, like who am I and how do I want to show up in the business world, what makes me unique and how can I help elevate the people around me by owning my badass, by owning my strengths, by owning my, female energy and not just, mimicking what I was seeing around me. Yeah. And one of the interesting things is
that we see a lot is there's a certain level of performance that you get to or achievement as a leader by checking all the boxes that you're supposed to check, like fulfilling the expectations that the marketplace has. Like, what does it mean to be a leader? How do I be that? How do I need to show up to be viewed that way by my peers or by my superiors, to have opportunity open up for me? And there's a ceiling to that. So at some point, there's a limitation to how influential you can be as a leader, and also just how empowered you can be by just checking all the boxes that you're supposed to check. And what we've seen again and again, and we've seen with you as well, is that when you start to discover and be curious what's beyond the box, well, and you are beyond the box. We are all beyond the box. And we give ourselves permission to really go beyond the box and say, well, what does it look like for me to be fully empowered as a leader and to be authentic and to be myself and to honor the things that are required to be a good leader, but to do both, not just have it be box checking. That unlocks a whole another level of potential for influence, for connection, for co-creation, and empowering others to do the same. So now we're building relationships and building a company around who we are authentically versus trying to fit into each other's perceptions of who we think we need to be to fulfill our expectations to each other. And then it's, then we find ourselves at some point feeling burnt out, feeling like we can't be ourselves. And we're questioning, how the hell do we find ourselves here? And how do I figure out my way out of it? Right. And so, you had that experience early on, and you said something really powerful in that you early on in your journey and leading Spekit. And you said something really powerful earlier, is that you found that work is more important as a leader, right? Tell me more about what you see there and why you say that.
Yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, and I can't remember if this was something that I learned in Abundant or elsewhere, but someone said, like, at the end of the day, like, you're your MVP. Like, you are your most valuable player. And I think for, a lot of the time, like, I was so focused on making sure that everyone around me, I was, like you said, checking those boxes and staying up late to make sure that I finished that one thing that I knew that one person was waiting for, and playing by all the rules and really just over optimizing for the external image that I wanted to make sure that I was fitting and what I thought, a leader needs to display, versus realizing at the end of the day, like, if I don't get enough sleep, I'm not showing up with the right energy to conversations, right? I can have over prepared for a presentation and fixed every little slide and done all those little things. But if I am not showing up from a place of abundance, right? Or of positive energy, of the right amount of, physical sleep, I maybe worked out that morning, the way that I show up is going to ultimately influence how that conversation goes way more than, did that slide have that one word that looked, that rang perfectly. And so I think for me, it was a shift of, instead of over optimizing for what I, these kind of external things that I thought would influence outcomes, instead of over optimizing for how can I invest in finding the thing, what brings me joy? How do I decompress? And what works for me isn't what works for you or for anyone else, right? And it's really that process of self-discovery. And that's where I feel like that personal growth journey needs to be faster, because, as a leader, you're constantly reinventing yourself, right? You've got your foundational values and you're going to build on those. But, as a CEO, the CEO I was when the company was getting off the ground, when I was doing all the things myself, is different now that I have a sales leader, a marketing leader, a success leader, and how I need to show up to be, a leader of leaders versus a leader of customers or a leader of SDRs. And so I think just realizing that you need to be constantly kind of, coming to terms with, the areas that you do need to grow, bringing awareness into that. And then really, I think being that voice of influence, right? My co-founder all the time tells me, you've pushed me to want to prioritize and be the best version of myself, because I've now seen what that looks like in you, right? And I think that's one of the most powerful things you can do for the people around you, especially your team, is, be that image of someone that's always looking to be the best version of themselves, and allowing themselves to, trip and fall in the process, knowing that they're going to learn from that and make that as much of a priority as that set of slides or prep ahead of time.
Right. And I know you had to do a lot of slides recently because you recently hired a VP of sales. Congratulations. Right. But prior to that, you were leading a lot of the sales org, right? On top of all your other responsibilities, many hats you have to wear as a CEO, right? It's a lot of responsibility. And you also had a successful round right before things got crazy in March, right? Hooray.
Yeah, actually both. So we fundraised for the first time last September, and that was my first time going through the whole VC space, going back to kind of like, today happens to be Women's Equality Day, like only 2% of VC funds go to women, right? And like that number is even smaller with SaaS. So to me, that was like, it was a big effort, but it was also very rewarding and fulfilling effort. And then during COVID, actually, like in March, I was actually in Switzerland for my grandma's funeral, unfortunately, when the travel ban happened, right? So when everything was falling apart, I just remember being on my flight back and thinking like, wow, I need to rethink our business. Like, is this going to accelerate? We're in remote training, we're in remote productivity. Is this going to be an accelerator for us? But, at that time, we kind of had to freeze. And so luckily, we'd already been talking to investors and brought on a phenomenal investor there, which was also, a big, feeling of accomplishment to bring on an investor during a time when like so many companies were struggling because they believed in our mission, they believed in the results we'd showed so far. But also just, learning to manage through a pandemic, to your point, which is, and lead and manage through pandemic, which is a whole new level of pressure for all of us leaders, right? And I'd love to actually turn it over to you. Like, what was it for you, when the pandemic hit, in terms of how you were thinking about abundant and thinking about your leadership? Like, how did it impact, your frame of mind?
Yeah, great question. And before, I'm happy to share a bit there. And before I do, I just want to just double tap on that. Like, what's more important, the slide or how you show up, right? That's like, that really resonates what you're sharing there. It's like, yeah, the slides matter. You want pretty slides, but if slides that are easy to follow in whatever you're presenting. But if you're not showing up and you're a powerful communicator, you actually believe the shit that you're saying, and people can feel your groundedness and your integrity and your conviction, like that matters more. You mentioned that you're your MVP. And yeah, you're your MVP. You're also your most valuable ingredient in all equations. Every interaction that you have, like, you and how you show up is more important than anything that you say. And how you show up, if you're showing up in a way that you are enriched, that you are connected to your vision, you're clear in who you are in that interaction and who you are just in general, your identity, then you're gonna find the right things to say, right? It's like sometimes we over prepare because we don't trust ourselves, and there's so much that we're capable of if we just take care of ourselves, to what you're saying. So you are the most important ingredient in all of your sales conversations, all of your leadership meetings, all of your fundraising meetings. Every single moment, you're the most important ingredient. So I just love that you're bringing that in. So your question for me was, why don't you ask it again? I think I got the essence, but you can ask again.
Just, I think, this pandemic brought on like a whole new set of challenges from a leadership standpoint, right? Because on a very personal level, like you're in fear, right? Like I was across the ocean, the travel ban happened, and I was trying to figure out like, how do I get back to the United States? And then I'm worried about my dad that's in a high risk category. I'm worried about, there's just so much stress and so much anxiety. And at the same time, you've got this team, you've got customers, you've got investors that are looking for you, at you for answers, that are looking for guidance, that are looking for that leadership. And so I think in many ways, like, it's in hard times that, your leadership really has an opportunity to shine the most, but that can also, it can also feel a little bit lonely in some ways, I think, from leadership. So I was just curious, what was that pandemic like for you, as a leader of an organization, but also as a leader of a community that looks up to you, to kind of deal with that, those emotions?
Yeah. There's definitely been challenging parts of the pandemic for everybody, right? Because just life is so different. All of our expectations have been flipped upside down. Like, one of the things I've been talking about right now is whatever your vision was 6 months ago, like it's different right now in some way. It's like whatever your plan was for the year, like it's no longer the plan. Like you had to throw the plan out and like reassess from the new landscape, personally and in how you're approaching the marketplace. All of our routines have been upended, and it's radical. It's so radical. One of the things that we believe at Abundant and we talk about is that the greater the uncertainty, the greater the possibility. And I think as a leader, I really believe that. I've seen that a lot of times. And so that's something I really leaned into, and we at Abundant leaned into during this time. And also wanted to bring to all the people that we lead, all the leaders that we support, and helping them really find the possibility in all this uncertainty. Because when there's a pandemic, or whenever a system, like all of our systems have been changed in the world right now, times like this, crisis, accelerate the inevitable.
Yeah.
So if something was going to fall apart, it's falling apart faster right now. If something was going to grow or a problem was going to be faced, it's going to be faced faster. And to me, it's no surprise if you look around, like how many other issues have come up and come to the forefront and come alive over the last 6 months during the pandemic, right? There's one crisis, there's this energy of uncertainty, and so many other inevitabilities have really come to the forefront and they've risen. And so there's a huge opportunity of this time that as a leader, I think there's of course all the ways that a time like this can trigger our stress response, our anxiety, our fear response. And we want to listen to that. But if we get caught up in it and sucked up into it, like so many people, you're walking around like a fear zombie right now. And it's like, is this person going to give me coronavirus because their mask's not on properly? Does this person have it? Does that, when I'm walking around the streets of San Francisco, there's some people right now where I'm just like, holy shit, like your whole life is a stress response right now. I can tell on your face. And then to compound on that, like, well, we'll just leave it at that.
Yeah.
But there's so many, that's so seductive. Also, like the economy is completely changing, right? Our political landscape is feeling really uncertain. So it's really easy if you're not in a place where you're leading yourself and you're taking responsibility for your leadership, to get swept up into all of that and to be just in a swirl of like, I have no idea what's happening. And on the other hand, there's the possibility to really accelerate vision, because this energy of change and uncertainty is so alive right now, which also means there's the opportunity for new relationships, new ways of doing business, for new products, for people to revolutionize the way that they work, they organize, they meet. So for companies that are companies of the future, that are doing things the right way, bringing products that are truly valuable, I think there's more possibility than ever before. So we've really tried to live that. And I was lucky enough to also have a plan, not for the pandemic, but our family was going to go live in the Midwest for 6 months, starting in March. And the timing just worked out perfectly that I was in the woods of Minnesota and Michigan for pretty much until 2 weeks ago. And so I was lucky to not be around the stress response of everything. And we were being responsible and safe, but like I was in a cabin in the woods. So, it's not like life changed that much out there. So yeah. And I think the last thing I'll share is what I've seen in our team and also in the marketplace for a lot of leaders is that, again, a lot of inevitabilities have been accelerated. People talk about right now, like we have a Zoom problem. We're on 8 hours of Zoom meetings every single day and it's draining. It's like, that's not Zoom's fault. Like that's your fault as a leader, right? It's like, how can you bring more engagement into your conversations? How can you be bringing more meaning into your conversations with your team? How can you help people feel more connected to the work that they're doing? Because if you're just running meetings that are tactical and logistical and you're not actually honoring the human side of your interactions, then Zoom's going to amplify the inevitable, which is realizing your meetings suck and that it's not very fun or engaging to be a part of that team, right? So I think I've just seen a lot of opportunity for us and for leaders out there to really double down on their leadership skills, realizing that you're going to get more in a return now than ever with it. And like, not only are you going to get more of a return, but you kind of need to take ownership for your leadership right now, or you're going to be faced with a lot of uncertainty, a lot more uncertainty with your team and your people. So I see your head. Is there anything that you wanted to talk more about there and resonate with?
No, I think like what you said, I agree with 100% in terms of like, looking for possibility versus problem. Like, I think more than anything, regardless of your spiritual, religious beliefs, whatever that they may be, like what this pandemic reminded us is that like at the end of the day, we're not in control, right? And so many of us live this kind of like false belief that we're in control of like our life and our outcomes and where we're going. And I think the way that I've communicated to my team is that, at the end of the day, we're not in control of whether this pandemic lasts 6 months or 2 years, right? Like, but we can take charge and like, take responsibility over the things that are in our control, right? So for us, from a business standpoint, it's like, okay, we can't control that, perhaps a third, perhaps 25%, perhaps 50% of our pipeline may have to go on budget freeze, might disappear entirely, right? But we can take charge and be focused, right? And like think of creative ways to do that. We can't control the fact that like conferences are not going to be happening for the next, foreseeable future, whether that's 6 months or a year, right? And for us, that was our biggest channel, right? We're in the software space. Dreamforce, you name it, was like our time to shine. That's where we got 80% plus of our pipeline. All right, that pipeline vanished. How can we get creative? How can we get focused in our messaging? And how can we like unite? And so I think overall, it really forced us to like be focused. It forced us to lean to that, like, okay, well, let's lean into that space of possibility versus fear, as a team. And I think to your point, like it brought back the human element, right? So it's like, hey, no, we're not going to do that 8th Zoom meeting of the day where we just have this strict agenda or presentation we're going through. Like, how can we, a lot of people have their lives turn around where like they're used to having kids. Like a lot of my team members, like our director of marketing has a 1-year-old baby, right? And like, yes, he was on our Zoom calls half the time because the nanny couldn't come to the house because, of COVID, right? And so I think overall in business, it brought like a whole new lens on like, how do we bring the human element truly back to business and really find, better ways to engage and to like, remember that like at the end of the day, like, yes, you're selling to a prospect, which is this label that you put on really just another human on the end of the line that's trying to figure out how can like you potentially help them solve their problem. And they're looking to learn and they're looking to relate and engage in a different way. And then lastly, just on a personal level, I was living alone during the pandemic and I came back from Switzerland, had some very strong symptoms. My dad was diagnosed. And so I basically didn't leave my apartment for like 3.5 weeks, which is the most time I've spent in solitude in a very long time. Right.
Did you tested? Did you have it?
Yeah, no, exactly. But what I was going to say is that like, it kind of forced me to, I could have been in that place of fear and anxiety and just stress, but instead I was like, okay, how can I focus? Like, this is for me when I'm used to being on the road 80-90% of the time, like this is a gift that I've been given to just like be still, right? And like stop looking for excuses like, oh, I can't work out, I can't eat healthy, I can't do all these things, I'm traveling all the time. It was like, hey, this is your time to like really test these excuses that you've been making in life, right? Oh, I don't have time to call my parents because I'm like, running in between flights. And so for me, I really tried to focus on like, what are my priorities, right? How can I shed the light in that spotlight on really like, have I been putting my family first? Have I been putting, has Spekit been like so overly dominating my life that I haven't made those priorities and like really spend that time, both in reflection and in introspection, just really, uncovering those areas of my life. So I think in a lot of ways, like, yes, the pandemic's been tragic in so many ways, but I think it has, like you said, shown a spotlight on a lot of personal, personal areas of opportunity and improvement as well as societal ones, like you said.
And the exciting thing is for leaders like yourself who are forging that right now, just imagine what's possible when we're not in the pandemic. Yeah. Right? It's like you're forging those new realities for yourself that then when it's not this crazy, right, when things are more stable, and by the way, who knows? Maybe things aren't as stable as they have, like, right? Because control is an illusion, like you're saying. And one of the things that's been illuminated is how little control we do have. So this awareness of control that you're mentioning, and controlling the things that you can, right, that you can influence, and letting go of the things that you can't. It's so important right now, and it frees up so much more possibility for you after this time as well, assuming things go back to some sense of what they were like before, and maybe they don't. But if you're coming from that place, it doesn't matter as much. Either way, you're a part of leading whatever your life is becoming, more than the circumstances around you. So really love where you're coming from there. And one of the other things about this time is the thing that we can all control is the meaning that we make of this time. Absolutely. What does this mean for us? What does this mean for our company? What does this mean for Spekit? What does it mean for our country, right? Are we falling apart, or are we coming together, right? Is it the end, or is it the beginning? These are all things that we get to, these are meanings that we choose to make. And I think it's really important how we individually choose to make those meanings, because that becomes a part of the collective conversation also. So that's leadership in a lot of ways, right? Whether it's the scale of our country or our globe, or it's the scale of your company, your family, and your own reality, your own world. Leadership is taking ownership for the meaning that you create around the things that are happening in your life, because we can't control the things that happen. Nobody's in control of this pandemic, but we can control the meaning that we're making of all of it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, I think with that, Melanie, I with our final few minutes here, I got a few more questions, but I think like a last big question for you, and then I got a couple smaller fun ones to wrap up. But when you look at where you're at now and the experience you've had during this pandemic, and where you were 2 years ago when you started on your journey, I'm curious how you feel that you're different as a leader, and like why you were prepared. How were you prepared for this? What's the work that you did that you're grateful for to yourself? Like, oh, I'm so glad that I took a look at these things as a female leader, right? As we're in Female Equality Day. I'm so glad that I faced these challenges personally and in my organization, so that I was really ready to take on this pandemic and to be in a place where you've been able to make a really empowering meaning and then create an empowering reality from that for you and your organization.
Yeah. So I think like abundant has actually been a huge part of that journey, which is why I actually, recently enrolled 2 of our account executives in the program as well, because I think at the end of the day, just sales is a hard career, and so much of that comes from, your mental preparedness and being able to handle, challenging conversations and more. But I think for me, like I shared earlier, personal growth, personal development just had never really truly been a priority for me. Like I'd dabbled in it here and there, but I'd never really spent time really understanding like, what are some of the limiting beliefs that are like, not just holding me back in life, but like almost like just casting a shadow on like where I can go, right? Because, for a long time, and that I shared pretty vulnerable way a few months back with Abundant, is that for a long time, like I thought I'd have to choose between like having a career and finding love, right? Because I was like, oh, well, if I become this like, very like, all in badass, woman's female CEO, all these things, then like men are going to be intimidating, right? And for me, like that's become, very, very clear that that's not the case, right? Because at the end of the day, like I think, love and intimacy come from a place of just like owning yourself and owning who you are and what makes you special and what makes, you. So for me, it's been like, a lot of work on just like self-love. It was something where I've always had a very high achieving mindset where, so much of my identity was really wrapped into like, my work and how I showed up, as a leader, how I showed up as a manager, how I showed up as an employee. And like, as long as I was, getting all A's in high school and like, crushing every goal that was set for me professionally, things were going well. But as soon as work wasn't going well, it's like my whole life was falling apart because so much of my identity was attached to that. And so for me, working with Michael, working with some of the other coaches, and meeting a lot of folks in Abundant has really showed me, like, what is my identity outside of work, and how can I nurture that? How can I grow that? How can I, like, really be like, what is Melanie as, a friend, a daughter, a cousin, a sister, a lover, versus, as a CEO or worker or manager or leader. And so a lot of that, like, personal development for me has been, like, really, like, just relearning how to, like, get to know myself. I actually just came back from a 5-day road trip that I went on, a solo road trip last week, through the national parks. Yeah, so I went through Moab and Bryce and Zion and Antelope Canyon, Telluride, and I was just, like, driving, and it was just, like, such a beautiful moment to be able to, like, really take the time to, like, like, who, admire just, like, the progress over the last year, right? And, like, the hard lessons, like, I failed more times than I can even count, right? But, like, what did I learn through those? And, like, really looking at life through a lens of glass half full, right? Versus, like, in the past years ago, if, like, something happened that, whether it was the company or whatever, like, I would just beat myself down over it, versus, like, realizing, like, wait, no, like, you know, going back to the MVP thing, it's just like, if you're not treating yourself from a place of compassion and empathy, it's just like, I was trying, like, I didn't mean for that to happen, right? Or if you made a mistake, like, okay, what can you learn from that, and, like, move on. And so I think a lot of my, me being ready for this next chapter as we really start growing has been coming to, really coming to terms with, like, who I am and, like, what I'm looking for in life beyond just the company. And that has allowed me now to be able to manage the stress of running the company, of hiring, and, like, the millions of highs and lows and decisions and everything else that comes with that, in a much more, I guess, positive and, like, progressive way, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And what a powerful way to, what a powerful conversation to be having today in Women's Equality Day, right? Female or Women's Equality Day? I think it's Women's Equality.
I think it's Women's Equality Day, and it's to, I looked it up this morning, it's to commemorate the passing of the 19th Amendment in 1920. So,
which, and just, we could talk for a whole nother 2 hours about this, right? But let's just, like, I want to just appreciate you for a moment and the work that you're doing as a leader who's a woman, because, like, 1920, it's like, it's 100 years ago, and it's like, that's actually not that long ago, right? That's like your grandma's mother, right? So, like, the whole, like, the generational shifts of empowerment opportunities for women today is, like, there's more work to do, and there's more leaders who need to really blaze the trail for creating that space for 50% of that funding to be in tech to be towards female leaders. So it's like your journey is not just for you, Melanie. It's for all leaders. It's not just for women leaders, right? It's because I believe when women rise in leadership, it creates space for all of us to do leadership in a way that works for us, right? Because even as a man, there's the boxes I have to check to fit in. But I think there's a way for female leaders to really blast through that ceiling in a way that makes a bigger difference. So thanks for being you, Melanie.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. And I think, like, a big piece of that, Michael has been a big piece of that, and just, like, helping me, like, realize that, like, owning your sexy doesn't have to come from a sexual place. It can come from, like, owning your charisma, owning your confidence, and like, those traits that, like, do really well in leadership as well in the workplace. And so, like, really coming to terms with that, like, how do you kind of blend, like, my more dominant, masculine traits with my female energy, and, like, to your point, elevate the next generation of women. And there's a lot that we're doing from a business standpoint too, where I'm realizing, for me, Spekit has really granted me a platform, right? A voice, at conferences now, at speaking panels, et cetera, to, hopefully inspire the woman to realize, like, to distinguish between the facts and, like, potential limiting beliefs that have been placed in the, like, their own growth, right? Or their own glass ceilings. but also encourage other businesses to, focus on diversity, right? And focus on like elevating women to have that same access to, really changing the world that men do. So I appreciate that. And hopefully, today, if any women are listening, if you guys have any questions or whatever in the workplace, feel free to reach out to me as well. I'm happy to share a little bit more.
Awesome. And just one final seed to plant on this. So this fall, we are pioneering and launching a women's leadership program, Melanie. So it's like a women's leadership community. So we'd love to talk with you more about that.
Yeah, do it.
Yeah. So I will be supporting that, but some of the female leaders on our team will be leading it. So
awesome.
Well, hey, I think final questions. What have you not been able to do during the pandemic? This is just a fun one that you're most looking forward to doing as things open up again. And
going to concerts, 25,000,000%. Like that is my escape. And I've been throwing some pretty good living room concerts, let me tell you. But that is by far like the one thing I miss the most, other than like obviously traveling and seeing people.
Me too.
I know.
We have the same answer. I know. I would love to, whenever it's appropriate, pick a show and like everybody who appreciates live music, like have us all go to the same one together and just like, do it in the abundant way, right? So do some breath work on the dance floor and just like get the vibes and just have an awesome evening together. So I'm on the same page. And also, Melanie, a lot of people know how much I love music and like send me song selections. And I kind of feel bad saying this, but sometimes I'm like, that song sucks when someone sends it to me. You're one of the people though, when you send music to me, I'm like, she knows what's up. Like,
speaking of, if you haven't listened yet, you should listen to Elderbrook. Do you know Elderbrook?
That was my question for you. Is like, what have you been listening to during the pandemic that you're like, hey, people should be listening to this?
I've discovered some new music for sure. Elderbrook is one of them. Really got a couple more electronic, but some just chill music. I've been actually in the last couple of weeks, I've been listening to the Abundant Contemplation playlist more than I listen to it a lot on my road trip. So that one's always a good jam. And then I've been listening to a lot of Rufus. Their Joshua Tree set has been one of my favorite sets to listen to.
There's a funny, Rufus is so good live. They're so fun. There's a song that I saw them play live once in one of their DJ sets. It's "What's a Girl to Do" by Fatima Yamaha that has really been vibing for me recently too. I was listening to it on my road trip.
Check it out.
All right. Well, Melanie, we're going to wrap up there. And I would, what a great conversation. I do feel like there's a lot more that we could have explored. So maybe we'll do this again sometime.
Let's do it.
I'd love to have you back. And for everybody who's watching, if you're curious to learn more about Abundant, you can go to abundantleader.com. And if you're someone who's interested in receiving support on your leadership journey, you can reach out to us and someone from our team would be happy to have a conversation with you to see if there's any way that we can support you. And if not, we're happy to have a powerful conversation with you. But Melanie, again, thank you so much for being on today. And looking forward to the next time we connect, which I'm sure will be soon. It was a pleasure today. Thanks so much.
Thanks so much. And guys, definitely check out Abundant. It's amazing.